And I believe that the war in our heads when we're doing this thing is always things like, what do people expect us to do? And what do we think we should do? And sometimes the think we should do wins out, because that often is the mind of the consumer, the gamer, the person. What we think we're supposed to do is often the boilerplate, whatever that is handed down to us from somewhere else. I don't often blame the writer. I think sometimes it's whoever told them to do it a certain way.
Yep. Welcome to Tabletop Talk, the podcast where I delve into the minds of tabletop gaming creatives. Join me as I uncover their creative process and inspirations. You are in the right place if you enjoy listening to thoughtful interviews with creative people.
My name is Anthony Boyd, but you might know me better as Runeslinger. When I'm not working on my own sporadic RPG, podcasting, and video projects, I listen to Tabletop Talk for its far more regular, deep dives into the brains of top designers in the role-playing game and wargaming spaces. I enjoy it a lot, and I think you will too.
Howdy friends, Craig here. My guest today is Cam Banks. Cam is a game designer known for his work on the Cortex system line of role-playing games, the lead designer for Marvel Heroic Role-Playing, and the Big Damn Heroes Handbook supplement in the Serenity role-playing game, as well as his work with Margaret Weis Productions on Dragonlance. He is the Cortex creative director for Direwolf Digital and the publisher of Cortex Prime. Cam, welcome to the third floor.
Craig. Thanks for having me on the show.
I've been doing this podcast for coming on 3 years now, and you have always been very high on my list. And I was just really tickled to finally sneak you in and get a chance to talk to you. But I want to tell you about something that happened very recently. I'm always on a long journey looking for superhero games. It has been my bugaboo in the 30 some odd years that I've been playing role-playing games. And I recently picked up Sentinel Comics playing. I was reading through it and I was just like, have I finally found my sweet spot? Have I finally found the game that, gives me enough mechanics that it's still a game? I love masks, but for my superhero games, I want something a little bit crunchier. And I've argued masks is not superheroes are a setting, not a function of masks, right? Masks allow you to tell stories with superheroes as opposed to being a superhero game. And I was reading it, and I was like, some of these mechanics that are really turning me on here just feel familiar to me. And I flipped to the front of the book, and son of a bitch, there was your name, which really got me laughing. And it was literally, I think, within a week that we caught up on social media with each other. So.
There's a great story involved how that game came together, which I'm sure we could talk about later. But it's really funny when people find.
I would love to talk about it now if you don't mind.
Yeah. Obviously, this is somewhere after the whole Marvel and Cortex thing had already happened. I got to know Dave Chalker and Phil Menard from working with them on Cortex projects. They were helping me out a lot with things, and then I brought them on to do a lot of heavy lifting work for Marvel Heroic. Each of them got to be the line developer actually for a specific event. So Phil got to do Civil War, I believe, and Dave was going to do Age of Apocalypse. I think that's how it worked out. But what happened then was that, because we all worked together on that, and I had a great time working with them. We were at Gen Con one year, and I said, the Sentinel of the Multiverse card game is so fun. We played it till very, very late at the Embassy Suites, which, if you've been to Gen Con, that place for many, many years was like gamer limbo. You went there, sat down with the game, and then you forgot what time was. It was very, very cool. And then Happy Hour came and went. No one cared. This game was so monumentally interesting to me because it was an entirely new IP. There was nothing about it that was from anything. It was obviously all homages. And if you don't know Greater Than Games, Sentinels of the Multiverse card game, it's not a collectible game. It's a deck building kind of thing, but the decks are already built for you. So again, not even a deck builder, I guess. But what stood out to me most was there was a character named Haka who was a sort of a Maori character, superhero from New Zealand. I'm like, I'm playing this guy. Look, this is. I don't care what you guys play, whatever you want. I'm playing him. This is my deck. Thank you very much. We played that. So I said, look, man, we should get the license to do this as an RPG. It'd be so cool, because we've just done Marvel. It was a huge thing, and we've done Smallville before, all this sort of stuff. It wasn't a thing that Margaret Wise Productions was going to do, but we thought we'll just go and talk to Christopher Bedell and see whether he's interested. So we did that, and then he's like, okay, very nice. Thank you very much. Cool. That's good. And I'm like, oh, wow, that was kind of a blow off. That's fine. Brush off from him. Never mind. We'll put it in the back burner. A year later, little did we know that after that conversation, he went off and he did a deep dive research into all three of us. He's like, okay, who are these people? What have they done on social media? What kind of values do they espouse? What kind of stuff do they do? What games have they made? What do they like? And then at the end of like a year, we went next year at Gen Con. Let's just try Christopher again and see. He's like, yeah, actually, I would love to do this. And I'm like, what changed your mind? He says, oh, I did my research.
You realize I talked a year ago, right?
I'm like, what? Okay, so anyway, but then we got on to do that. He flew us down to St. Louis, and we sort of had these big sort of meetings and stuff. I ended up not doing as much on it as Dave and Phil did, because they did a lot of really hard mechanics work on there, but I got to come up with a few concepts. The whole red, yellow, green gyro thing was, I think, one of mine. And, we just loved working on this property, and we came up with various things. We tested this out at Metatopia that year. And before we even announced that we were doing this, we had this sort of playtest of it. But we couldn't use Sentinel Comics IP because everyone would know. And so we said, okay. So I think Dave came up with the idea of using it like we did kind of a Thundar the Barbarian ripoff, like, Warlords of the Savage Kingdom. And we just had made up characters, and it was completely different tonally, right? But we tried it out, and it worked amazing. And we thought, this is good. So we're onto it here. We should do this. So, yeah. And then they've continued to do stuff. It was a huge Kickstarter. It was really great. Amazing production values on there. Everyone at Greater Than Games was great to work with. Yeah, so that was the story. And the funny part about all of it is just the fact that we're like, we want to do this. We want to make this game. It would be fantastic. And then, just ghosted us, just silence for a year.
That's amazing.
And he comes back, and then he's like, biggest fan. I'm like, I love you guys. You guys are great.
Isn't that funny? Well, now we're going to go backwards, Cam. We're going to put you in the spot that you've been put in on many a podcast, which is finding out your origin story. But I like to kind of phrase it a little bit differently. So at some point, Cam, you knew nothing about role-playing games. You knew nothing about having a sheet of paper and a funky dice and pretending to be somebody else. And it was put in front of you for the very first time. Can you take me back there?
I'm trying to recall what the order in this happened, because I believe it was Warlock of Firetop Mountain, which was a Ian Livingston had created this, and it was this is before Warhammer and before White Dwarf. He and Steve Jackson, the UK one, not the American one, had created this fighting fantasy game books. And their first one was Warlock of Firetop Mountain. And my friend Kimball, who was a good friend of mine and still is to this day, I'm still in a group with him playing games, but this is back when we were 10. He had just gotten this game book, and I'm like, what is this? Because we were into comics, and we were into sort of things. We didn't really know fantasy all that well, but he said, this is great. And so I thought, oh, I wouldn't mind reading that, but I didn't want to read it at the same time as him, because obviously he was playing through it, and he'd played through it 700 times. I don't know. So I went to the store, and I got the Citadel of Chaos, which was the second of this series, and that was the one that Steve Jackson had written. I guess they had tag teamed to write the first and second books. So I played that, and I had a great time. I thought this was fantastic. What is this sort of thing? What the heck is... I don't know what any of these things are. Not long after that, I saw Endless Quest books in the bookstore that I went to, and that was one called Dungeon of Dread, obviously one of Rose Estie's first ones that she'd written for them. And there are terms in there like halflings and kobolds, and I don't know what any of these were. And keep in mind, this is 1980, 1981. And I know that D&D obviously existed before that, but I had never heard of it. And so I immediately, my buddy and I went, we need to find more about what this is. So, we looked into that. I think that the experience of sort of playing through something that wasn't quite D&D first, but was very a solo thing, and then having shared it with my friend in that way, like we would trade the books out once we were done with them, was the beginning of this idea of collaboration, but it wasn't actually the sort of the root experience, I guess, that most people tend to have. Like that, I wasn't brought to a game store to play it or anything else. Yeah.
So you're exchanging these books. You and your friends are playing the hell out of it. It is the gateway kind of to the hobby. What was next? Was D&D next? Like where did you? What's the first time you played a quote unquote proper?
Yeah,
RPG?
so
we
were at primary school, which is like elementary school in New Zealand. This kid had moved to New Zealand from America. He came from Denver, Colorado, or Boulder, actually. Boulder. He would tell everyone it was Mork and Mindy Town, which is how we knew where he was from. I'm also obviously dating myself constantly with this whole story, but anyway, this is...
Well, and I knew the reference, so we're good.
But this is our friend Kurt, and he'd come to New Zealand, and he'd obviously had no friends, but he found us really quickly because we were talking about these books, I think, and he said, "Oh, I know what those are. That's this." And he said, "I've got all the D&D books." And we're like, "Oh," because we saw that D&D was there was some books in the bookstore that were D&D, but we didn't know what that was, where to start, what was going on with it. We only knew the Endless Quest books, Fighting Fantasy, right? So Kurt said, "I'll run a D&D game for you, and we'll see what it's like." And here's us under a tree in the playground, and he says, "Okay, so this happens, and the door opens, and some goblins rush out. What do you do?" And I immediately, because my friend Kimball had already met with him and talked to him about doing this, and he said, "Oh, we should get this guy, Kurt. He's really great." So he was excited, and I was like, "Okay, I have no idea what's going on here." So I said immediately, I stepped forward and I said, "Hey, it's okay. We're making a movie. You don't have to get involved. This is all fake. We're making a movie." And my buddy is like, "What are you doing? That's not how that works. There's no movies in this." But Kurt was like, he just completely took it and ran it. And the goblins were like, "Oh," he said, "roll a die and find out whether you convinced him." And the goblins were like, "Oh, sorry." And they sort of backed out the door. I think that was the moment I realized that this is all totally off the cuff. Like the planning is good, but But my buddy was like, "What are you doing?" And then he realized that we're having a good time. It was obviously fun, but I think he was a bit sore because he wanted the actual experience, right? What's the classic experience? Right. But no. So we played some more. Then we went out and his parents got him the basic set, the one with the Larry Elmore cover. So the red box, Frank Mensa, I guess, is the author. And then for my birthday, I got it as well. But we played through that. My first adventure with him, with Kimball as the GM, was very short. I met a dwarf, and he didn't see the carrion crawler in the opening of the entire whole dungeon. Nothing else had happened. The carrion crawler came out. It attacked me. I was paralyzed and got eaten. So, first character down. Not a good start, right?
That carrion crawler from that red box has many a victim.
It's too OP for anyone to come. I mean, if you had a party of adventurers, I'm sure it would be better. But I think it even gets 8 attacks or something stupid. But that led to us sort of getting involved in D&D and playing different games from that point on. So that was my first actual from-the-box game with someone who hadn't kind of come to us with it from somewhere else. But I think the funny thing about Kurt's game stuff, he had all the old original cover AD&D books. He had the Holmes basic set, and we borrowed all this stuff from him. He lent them out freely. He was a great guy, and still is. I'm again playing in a different group with him now. But these memories of just sharing books around, and then maybe eventually getting one yourself because your birthday came along. Super cool memories of just getting involved in it. It was very off the cuff, very very fun.
So, Cam, that we know now that's the beginning of what would become a career for you and would become, a good bit of what takes up a lot of your life. As an adult now, looking back at young Cam, do you have a sense of why? Why is it that of all the things that you encountered, this is the one that got its hooks into you enough that it ended up being a life pursuit?
I mean, that's a good question, right? Because I think the creative element, storytelling, people always default to that. And I think that's true. We were telling stories and
Right.
playing make-believe on the playground in fanciful ways based on, movies that we liked and comics that we read for ages before we even had dice involved in this. So I think that kind of carries forth that same idea, making things up and seeing how they turn out. It wasn't that long after we started playing that I was, really keen. I got the bug to write and design games of my own, and they were terrible. I mean, these were terrible. Just filing the serial numbers off D&D and putting something else on it. I think I made a G.I. Joe game.
Nice.
However, in New Zealand, G.I. Joe, and in the UK, it's Action Man, which is a weird kind of thing. That. It's the same characters. It's got snake
Makes
eyes.
Total sense.
It's Action Man, not G.I. Joe, because they're like, what's a G.I. in the UK?
Right.
So I made a game of that. I think I made a game that was based on Tron. We did all this stuff when we were kids, and I think some of it I found some of the school exercise books with graph paper in it that I had written all these games in. And I would illustrate them and try and do the fonts correctly and everything else. So I think the bug bit me really early on. I mean, I just wanted to make games and then try them out.
So Cam, and I can tell because of the stories and the timing that you and I are of similar age. And, I came across the Red Box first and just consumed got Gamma World and just all these other games and was trying to try as many games as possible. What I never did though was sit down and file the numbers off of a D&D and come up with G.I. Joe or try to come up with my own games. And I'm trying to understand the difference, right? So we both loved it. We both enjoyed it, but you attacked it from a very different angle than I did. And I'm wondering whether you understand why that is. What's that drive to say, I'm loving this, I'm enjoying it, I want to make with it? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Like a Lego toolkit,
right.
Box of Lego. Prior to this whole thing, what we were doing, my friend and I, we would make our own board games because and here's the thing, part of it is we were poor, right? So
right.
You can't afford a lot of stuff when it's expensive. So we made our own board games. We'd cut cereal boxes open and we would take the cardboard of that and spend I would go over to his place and we'd sit at his kitchen table. We'd spend a whole afternoon on a Sunday creating board games with felt tip pens and markers and coloring them and making them. And we had the rules for them and we had cards sometimes and little counters. And they were pretty innovative stuff. I have to tell you, I mean, that was better than our RPG first attempts. But the only people playing them was us. No one else was playing them. We didn't sell them or do anything else. And I think that feeling of hey, we could do this if we have the time and the interest in it. We can do it, and we didn't have to spend a lot of money. I mean, the cereal boxes were already there. We already had the felt tip pens and everything else, The RPG thing, I think, is somewhat similar. For me, the ideal situation is I get to play in someone else's sandbox, but I'm going to do it by using some creative talent of my own. I think I can adapt this into something else. And I think that speaks to how things have ended up with me now. I mean, that really is my job.
Right.
I turn someone else's stuff into RPGs, which feels at times like it's not my own stuff. I can't point at things and say, I made that IP up.
Mm-hmm.
But I can sort of say, I love this IP. I recognize it, respect it. I know the people who love it as well. And the people who created it felt enough trust in me to do something with it to make it so other people could play this version of it. And I think that's kind of what's always been for me too.
So if we continue down the road, Cam, what was after D&D for you and the crew? So what was the next big game, the next big landmark?
The next big one, I mean, we played things like Star Frontiers, Gamma World. We never did Boot Hill because we didn't care about cowboys. I think the next big one probably was Marvel Superheroes.
Uh-huh.
And we'd been playing a lot of D&D and a lot of things like Palladium, which came out, but we always defaulted back to D&D because it was whatever. These were all just accessories to bolt onto D&D. But Marvel Superheroes came out, I think that was 1984, and I had seen ads for it in Dragon magazine, which I didn't buy. My friend bought them. I saw the back cover of White Dwarf, though, had Captain Britain on it with his stats, which I thought was amazing. That was really good marketing. Let's sell this to the UK people by saying, here's Captain Britain. You want this game because it's him now, right?
Right.
So I sort of really liked them. There was a adventure that came in, and it was a World War II sort of like the Invaders adventure in Dragon Magazine, where you had to stop some World War II villain from blowing up the Manhattan Project device in New York. And it had Cap and it had Bucky, but it also had like all these other people like the Wizard and Jack Frost and Miss America. And they all had their character cards with their stats and feeble, typical, I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. I mean, not only is it comics, I love comics, but this is not even remotely like D&D. This is different.
Right.
And we went on a holiday, my family were down to the South Island, and we were touring around and we were doing all this stuff. I had taken a bunch of D&D books with me to read on the ferry and on the train, and then just bored out of my skull, but reading these things over and over again. And we went into a bookstore the day we were going to go out some important place. I went in there, I saw they had the yellow Marvel Superheroes basic set sitting on the thing, shrink wrapped, whatever. I said, I really want this book, this box. And my parents said, well, it doesn't look like D&D. We've had a bit of a problem with that a little bit lately. Might be a bit, morally, whatever. I'm like, okay, whatever. It doesn't matter. This is comic books. No, cool. So we bought that. I continued with them for the rest of the sort of like trip around, whatever. We made back to the motel. I stayed there. They went and did something else. And I read that thing probably 12 hours straight.
Mm.
And it wasn't, we hadn't even left the motel for that trip, and I had already made like 16 characters and bad guys and plotted out adventures and things for this game, which I was consumed by. So, yeah, and I think Marvel Superheroes dominated my life for the next 2 or 3 years. Ran that game till the end of time. Every time a new edition came out, the advanced set came out, we bought that. We tried out certain things, realized some of the rules didn't quite work, so we patched a bit in there. But like every time a official handbook supplement came out, I bought it. I had everything for that thing. So yeah, that was like through the rest of my teenage years and into college, I was doing Marvel Superheroes quite a lot.
Yeah, hearing you describe that, Cam, just like immediate these visceral memories I have of that yellow box and then the bluish purple box when it came out. And I remember those encyclopedic volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4 of that had just 2-page spreads of every single character and villain in alphabetical order. They released it, and it's just so visceral. And a buddy of mine, when we would just sit in his bedroom with paper and just make character after character after character. And of course, all of them were filed off serial numbers, like 3 versions of Wolverine and 2 versions of Iceman and stuff. But it's so much fun.
There was a feeling too at the time of like, we got to make our own characters because the ones in the comics are their own thing. They're special, right?
Yes.
And I soon got over that with some of my friends because I started like running games where we would integrate some of their own original characters with characters from the comics that they liked. But the trick here, I think, was that we made those characters from scratch because the official versions hadn't been published yet. And later on, when like the handbook came out or the box of Avengers came out or whatever, we'd compare them and go, I think we were pretty close, like, that's cool. Still using my one, but that's fine, whatever. So yeah, I think I fully get with this idea of like making knockoff characters because in some ways you have control over that. Like it's your story and you did it.
And there was, it's funny you say that because I've never thought about it, but I do think that I had this, I'm not allowed to play Spider-Man, right? I'm not allowed to be Captain America. Yeah. And I think, because you play original characters in Star Frontiers and in D&D, I did the same thing with Marvel. When was your first foray in any level of professional work here? So when did that first begin for you and what did that look like?
This was years later. By that time, around mid-1996, 95. So I fell in love with someone on the internet, which is my own little love story. She's amazing. We're still married today. We have 2 kids. I flew to see her in Europe. She was there to study abroad. She's from Kansas. She's from Wisconsin, which was the University of Kansas at the time. She went on a study abroad year in France, and I flew there to meet her. And I'd already known her from playing with her on Amber Mush, the online Amber Mud that a lot of us were all friends on. This is the same place where a lot of people like Fred Hicks and Rob Donahue and Jim Butcher and all of us were all buddies. And before any of us became publishing famous people, quasi-nerd known. But I met her on there, and I went and met her, and I proposed to her in Scotland on a little trip up there. And
no kidding.
The beginning of that. So I moved to America to get married because we had a choice. Like either she comes to New Zealand and ends her schooling because she was in grad school, or I give up my dead-end job at a comic book shop, which was slowly being bought out from under us by, investment banker people, and moved to America. So I did that. And then I spent a few years trying to just do stuff with games, but, cobble together my own things. It wasn't the same as it was when I had all my friends, who were always feeding into it. But at one point, I think it was, I'm trying to remember when this was exactly. It was in 2000. D&D 3rd edition had just come out. And a bunch of us went to Gen Con and we played the game, and we really had a great time with it. I had a half-orc druid, which is not the best start for any kind of 3rd edition thing. But it was that year, and I think it was 2000 when they just launched it, and it was a huge thing. Everyone played it. So many people played it. As soon as I got home, and I had been converting the Dragonlance characters, the Tannis and Sturm and Caramon, all this, my favorite characters, I'd been converting them into different game systems for years. Wow. I had versions of them for Pendragon. I had versions of them for Rollmaster. I had versions of them for other games because I was like, D&D, whatever. And 2nd edition D&D, I completely burned out on. We didn't like it at that point. But 3rd edition came out, new. So I converted them all. And as it happened at the same time, I was also working a job where I was a temp, and they just gave me a computer, and they said, hey, all day, what you want you to do is go on the internet and look for references for things for, this is AccuWeather, by the way, I was working for.
No kidding.
Awful. So I was there working at AccuWeather as a sort of temp, but I was in the convention department. We were nice people there, lovely people there doing conventions. But they didn't care that I was just you go on internet, just find things, and then save them off and then do whatever. But in between that and on breaks and things, I would go on Usenet or various kind of other places where they had huge discussions about RPGs. And 3rd edition was obviously being talked about. And I said, I'm going to post my versions of the classic Dragonlance characters in 3rd edition. Here's their stats. I hadn't seen them anywhere. No one had done this before. So I did that, and I shared them one at a time. And here's Tika, here's Goldmoon. And it got the attention of some people who were working on an official Dragonlance fan forum. Now, I say the fan part importantly because it wasn't Margaret's at this time necessarily.
Right.
Wizards had decided that they were going to let certain fan communities have the official fan community for it. The Dragonlance Nexus was the ones who got the rights to do Dragonlance and use that stuff and then be a fan hub. Right. Without risking any cease and desist orders and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we did that, and we were going to come up with a fan version of Dragonlance for 3rd edition, a fan conversion and everything else. I was on a mailing list. We spent, no joke, 3 weeks arguing about what languages to put into this thing. And I was, oh my God. But I was brought onto that because of all these fan conversions, right? And so that wasn't professional necessarily, but it was like this. But that was when, at that point, Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss had gotten the rights from Wizards to make the actual book. Wizards was going to publish the 3rd edition Dragonlance rulebook, but they were going to outsource it to Tracy and Margaret to have people write it for them, and then we'll publish it. And then anything after that would be done by Margaret Weiss and her company. And so I got to work for them. It was great. But those characters, that was where I started, just making
Isn't that something?
Conversions for D&D.
So what was it? Because, boy, there's a lot of fantasy series that were running at those times. It wasn't just Dragonlance, but obviously because you'd spent so much time and were so attached to these characters, converting them. Do you have a sense of why that is? What was special about it? I
think, and I'm going to say this is nostalgia driven in many ways. just like those fighting fantasy books were passed around but between me and my buddies, the Dragonlance Chronicles were the first 3 books that came out.
Yep.
The Legends ones came out some time after that, but we were already well into the games by that point. But we passed those books around and really loved them because, there wasn't really any fantasy novel books that we read that were sort of D&D-like. There was a lot of, obviously, tons of fantasy at the time. Obviously, Tolkien, for example, everyone was reading Lord of the Rings. I didn't like those books. They were too hard for me to read. They were very boring, and people hate me for saying this, but
I've been roasted on this podcast because I've said that as much as I like Tolkien, he's not an easy read, and
no, he needed an editor.
Some nasty letters,
and no one wanted to do that. So again, send all emails to Craig.
That's right.
But Dragonlance, I just loved it. It was like, oh, this is D&D, but also it was like very, very different. It was had stories, it had sort of betrayals, and it had love stories and their romance and everything else. It was fantastic. And that was 1984, 83. So at the time that I was getting into Marvel superheroes, I was also sort of, my fantasy itch was being scratched by these books. And
got it.
I don't think we even played a lot of the modules at that time. We did later on. But I was just voraciously reading these, and anything I could read that was like them. So to get to jump ahead in the future, I mean, obviously, since I love them so much, I think my friend, the one I told, Kimball, who we discovered the games together with, decided he was going to run Dragonlance and 2nd edition D&D when those books came out. They were horribly republished because all the stats were wrong, and they didn't bother to tweak anything for the fact that the dragons in 2nd edition were way more powerful than they were in 1st. And we played the first adventure with all the classic characters. I was Tannis because Tannis is the best. And we all died absolutely murdered by the Black Dragon because there's no way you can beat that. Unless you have the Dragonlance, you have to stick it with that. Otherwise, you're dead. I have looked back and checked this out too, and I looked back and I thought, that could almost be true for the original module. You could almost be just destroyed. There's an ancient Black Dragon in there, and it's the first one.
Wow.
But you have a chance in the first module to do it, and if you have the not stick it with the Dragonlance, I'm totally bad. If you hit it with the blue crystal staff, it will die. That's how it works. But we didn't think about that, and we had no idea, and we didn't even have it at the point. The Goldman character hadn't found it, so it was terrible. It was a disaster. But that moment stuck in my mind. I'm like, this is bad. You can't have a module and play it and have a good time when the thing is designed to absolutely destroy you, except for one little magic widget, which you might not get.
Right.
So, yeah, a lot of that was going on in my head. I think that together with that experience playing that, we kept going. We sort of retroactively said, no, that didn't happen, and tried again. And we had a good time, but we went so far off the beaten path on that thing that I really love this idea of recreating them for a new edition of the game with a much better focus on like what could possibly happen if you did different things. So they've been accused of being railroady adventures before, and that to some degree the first couple are, right? But they weren't that much more railroady than a lot of the stuff that was being published at the time otherwise. I think it's maybe unfair criticism of them at that point.
So there's an obvious answer to this question. Question being is, when were you first a quote unquote professional game designer, right? And creator. And that's when the first time someone paid you to do it.
Yeah.
But what I would be more interested in knowing is when did you first realize you were? When did you first feel like a professional game designer? Do you remember what that project was that made you go, holy shit, like I'm the real deal?
There was a monster book for Dragonlance that was published called The Bestiary of Kryn, which was a collaboration between myself and my friend Andre LaRoche, who at the time was so young. He was the youngest guy on the whole team. But he and I were asked to write this book. It's just the two of us. And the job was go out and find every Dragonlance monster from all the old sources, from 1st, 2nd, Saga Edition, which was the card-based game. Find all the monsters and then make them into a book. And we said, you got it. We dug through everything. We even had stuff that was in Dragon Magazine and an article that was never published anywhere else. So we did everything. All those things were from somewhere, or there were versions of things that we thought would be cool to add into Dragonlance and so on. Huge fun during that project. Loved it. Many sort of hits and misses in terms of the process, but we got it under our. We figured it out. We were good at this now. We went to Gen Con the year was going to get published, and we knew it was not at the show yet. It was somewhere at a port being delivered. And like we were here, there was a seminar, and we're going to talk about this thing. And it showed up, which was fantastic because they had obviously gotten it in, and we were over the moon, so people could get it and we could sign these books. So the first time anyone came up to me and said, I want to sign this book, it's got my name on the cover of the book. I know I put a lot of hours into this thing and blood, sweat, and tears making these monsters, which on some of the forum chatter were like, there's no way they'll ever do this. There's no way this character will, this monster will never be in this thing. What about this? And like, nope. And we listened to them and no, we're going to put that in there just because you said we never would. But signing that thing, I think, was the moment I realized, oh my God, I'm actually like, this is a job. I'm doing this, and people are reading it and like it, and they want me to do more of this, right? So, huge. I will say the caveat with all of this is that as a New Zealander, I grew up with there's a kind of a phenomenon here, which is called the tall poppy syndrome. And that is obviously an opium reference, but it's a thing where the tall poppy gets its head cut off. And this is not as much true today in 2024 as it was back in the 80s and 90s, and younger. But the idea that if you stick your head above the crowd and trumpet your own achievements, you'll get cut down by the crowd. Like you'll be the first to get your head cut off, right? So don't do it. So it was ingrained upon me is that not only is that not cool, you don't sort of go up and say, hi, I'm amazing, everyone else is whatever. You have to lift everyone up. So the whole idea of the rising tide lifts all boats, but also the idea of you're also climbing on the shoulders of others. You should bring others up with you. So that was always my thing. So I think that it was hard to try and go out and talk about how I've done this work without also sort of somehow finding a way to make sure other people recognize the other writers, the editor, the artists who did all that stuff. And this has always been true for the stuff I do, right? So I guess I was really thrilled that I had my name on a book and it was this cool thing, but I didn't get there by myself. I needed other people helping me out. And so that was, that's my philosophy for it.
Yeah. So I would imagine, Cam, if I made you graph out your career, I'm sure there was pinnacles and there were tough times during it. Do you recall the closest you've ever come to I'm not doing this anymore, I'm going to do something else? Or did that never happen?
Yeah, it did happen. I was very, very close to giving all of it up. We'd moved to New Zealand. This was in the end of 2018. And so in the following year, 2019, I had moved there. I had this huge Kickstarter that was successful. Huge by my standards. I mean, huge, not huge by anyone else's. Right. I think like $80,000 was a lot of money for me. And I'm like, holy crap. And then almost all of it goes to taxes. I'm like, what the hell? I can't do anything. I had obviously committed all the stuff for people. The backers were there. I had all this stuff done, written. I had paid everyone off. All the people who contributed had been paid. So there was no problem of me defaulting on any of those, but I was very, very worried that I was never going to get this thing done. And I thought this is going to have to become like a part-time thing. I will have to keep hitting at it. I will do all the editing myself because I can't afford to pay anyone. I will do all the public. I will find out who the printers are. But it wasn't going to keep us alive. I was on, there's no way that money was any good. And I was on, unemployment benefit here. It was just very bad. Yeah. And I told my friends, I said, we just can't make ends meet. It's very, very difficult. Help me write a CV so I can get an actual job. And they put their heads together. I got some really good friends who said, okay, here's how this works in New Zealand. You do this, you can get this, write this, refer to your skills as a game designer in different ways so that people will want to work for you, And so I put that out there, and I was looking to see maybe getting a job in the corporate world here, and just like, I'll do something. I can convert all the skills to something else. Then I get a message from this guy, Adam Bradford, who says he really wants to talk to me about stuff, especially the Marvel game. And I said, okay, whatever. Yeah, I'll talk to you. And he says, no, I think you really want to talk to me. It'll be great. What time is good for you? And so I ended up on my driveway on my phone talking to this guy who I'd never talked to before or know who he was for 2 hours. And it started out with him saying, I want to bring you on to help me consult for a potential Marvel thing that we might do. And then it became, hey, what are you doing with this Cortex thing? Who owns that? Is it done yet? Who owns the rights for that? And then it's like, oh, so you don't own it. You're licensing it from Margaret. And is she not doing any games anymore? And that's not happening? Oh, how much do you think she'd want to sell it to us for? And I'm like, what are you even talking about?
What's happening right now?
What is going on? Fandom basically then went to Margaret Weiss and bought all the rights for Cortex and all of the contents that everything had been done for it that they were still able to have, all the IP that was still owned. And that also meant all the stuff I had done for Kickstarter was actually theirs too because I made it under license.
Right.
And everything went over there, and then they said, and I'm going to give you a job, and we're going to fly you to Alabama. You're going to meet us here in Huntsville. We make D&D Beyond. We do this thing. You can come have fun. It's whatever. I said, and I was like, later on, sobbing to my wife. I said, I have never had anyone come out of the blue and say, we want to pay you what we think you're worth. We want to give you the job you really want.
Oh, Cam.
From all of us sort of like having to deal with, unemployment benefits and everything else. And so just, yeah. So that was like, there was no way to explain how out of the blue that was. But later on, it was said, like, the way that you conduct yourself online is a huge, big deal. So if you don't act like a terrible person to people generally, I mean, obviously, we all make mistakes, but
sure,
if you are the kind of person who really commits to being a good person if you can, other people will notice. They'll they'll pay attention to the stuff. You never hear about the people who listen to you and understand what you say and then go off and sort of make their own minds about it. They don't talk about it. It can make a huge difference, and that's the sort of thing. It's like it was like the Christopher Bedell Greater Than Games thing all over again. Adam had gone off and done all the research. He'd looked at all my social media, read all my games, knew what Marvel was to me and everything else, and just brought me on. And I thought, oh my God, so that's incredible. So that was the beginning of the turnaround for me. I went from being, almost giving up on everything and going off and becoming some manager at a bank. Seriously, it was one of the jobs I think, I'll just go work in a bank.
What an incredible story. So guys, the Insider Insight series allows me to sit down with designers, developers, artists, writers, and creators and learn how they approach their work. I try to understand their process, inspiration, and the methods for crafting their creations. I've got a lot more I want to talk to Cam about. We've touched on a lot of things, so I'm going to dive back in. Let's talk more about Dragonlance. We'll be right back. Attention all floor heads, gather round. I have a quest for you. You can simultaneously show your love for the show and embark on rewarding adventures. Head over to drivethrurpg.com, your one-stop shop for all things gaming. Whether you're looking for rulebooks, maps, art, or epic tales to enhance your gaming experience, it is that one-stop shop. Now, in the show notes, there's a unique affiliate link. Every one of your purchases directly supports Tabletop Talk if you use that link. It's like casting a powerful spell that helps us keep the podcast going strong. So next time you're itching for a new adventure, follow the affiliate link in our show notes or bookmark it now in your browser. It can be your portal to everything on DriveThruRPG. Now let's get back to the show, but please support the show by using that DriveThruRPG affiliate link next time you are shopping at the site. So Cam, obviously we talked about Dragonlance, and now understanding your origin stories and some of your approaches and the origins of it, I think I'm going to take an angle on this a little bit different than I think I first anticipated, because you made a comment that really stuck with me, which was, I find myself creating based off of other people's work. I get put into these worlds, whether it be Marvel, whether it be Dragonlance, and then I I take it and complete it or bring it to a new venue, right? Or a new medium.
Yeah.
So we learned a little bit of the origin story of how Dragonlance ended up becoming part of your life from a creation standpoint with the work on Usenet and you being found inside this official thing. What was your first official work for Dragonlance?
My first official work. So I did some content for that book that Wizards put out. A lot of the stuff in there was written by me or designed by me.
Okay.
But that was one of those things where we'll just get these people who work for us to volunteer. I mean, it wasn't quite the same as having a proper byline and everything else, right? Mm-hmm. So I was a contributor to that, but I wasn't really like, there wasn't sort of a professional freelance job the same way it later on was. I think it was the Age of Mortals sourcebook, which we did. For those who aren't familiar, there's the War of the Lance era, which everyone kind of knows because that's when all these characters like Tanis and Kiliara and Sturm and so forth come from. The whole module series is based on that. The books were based on that. At some point, they did a thing where they blew the world up and then they brought it back again and they did other things. And there was the Fifth Age, which was the card game. And then after that, they brought Wizards to the Coast, brought Margaret and Tracy back to sort of relaunch the whole thing with the Age of Mortals. And the Dragons of something, some Hourglass Mage, it's just various different things were done at the time. But what they wanted was moving it forward. So they had this new era. They had all the different races and classes and things you could play. They didn't leave out wizards. They didn't leave out clerics. It was all great. And our job was to essentially write the handbook for that period of time, which was the current era in the novels that were still being published. Wizards were still doing books for them. So, hey, why don't you do the setting book for that? So we did that. And a lot of my work on that was, again, I did some monsters, which was kind of how I got springboarded onto the bestiary after this. But also prestige classes and things, Man, those were fun to write. And, what, I'll tell you,
were cool.
We playtested none of it. None of it was playtested. I don't mind saying, I think this is so common in especially the era, the 3rd edition era, where people were putting books out. I would love to hear a story of a successful playtest of any of that stuff at the time before it was published, because we were all hitting deadlines. We were all hitting, I had a fairly good grasp of how to put them together, and later on they became much better at doing it. Mm-hmm. But that stuff in that early book, I look back now and, oh my God, that's really kind of creaky. But I think that was true for everyone working on it. Any indie third-person doing anything with that wasn't Wizards, that wasn't a D&D team making their stuff for OGL, for whatever SID stuff. It was all seat of your pants, try it out, seems like it works, we'll give it a go. And I think we can even acknowledge that even some of the stuff that Wizards did was broken, right? So yeah. It's a moving target. But yeah, that was the first thing. I had my name in it, and I was very happy to be contributing to that. Got a paycheck and thought, holy crap, money! So... So that's that.
Let's talk about the setting book. Where do you get started with something like that, right? So can you give me an idea of what the task is, right? So what is put in front of you, and they say, this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
And can you give me an idea of maybe how you would attack such a thing? Because where you end up is this huge volume and work. And I'd love to get a sense of where you start and how you work through that to get to the end.
Something like that starts with a good outline. The outline wasn't one that I did, so I can't give credit for that. I think Jamie and those folks were doing a lot of the admin level stuff to try and sort of say, hey, this is what we want. And I'm sure that Wizards of the Coast had given them some guidelines for how these things should be written up. Mm-hmm. We were all following that. We were even using the same Word documents that they used, the same template. All the fonts were the same. Everything was just basically Wizards of the Coast that we just used because it was the best way of doing it.
Right.
But the outline obviously is very important. And I iterated on this idea for many, many occasions. Like, what's the best way of doing a source book for a setting to tell this sort of like important things about it and then let it be something that people can take and use elsewhere? I don't think we did a great job on some of that stuff at points. I think there were some things that were very wordy. I think we didn't really give the GM enough of a basis for making their own stories. I think we did all the rules stuff right, for what as I said, playtested, who knows, but we had all the content. But then we'd do like, and here's this location and it's this stuff. But a lot of that was us trying to figure out what would we want to see in this thing versus what do we have to put in here.
Interesting.
And I believe that the war in our heads when we're doing this thing is always things like, what do people expect us to do?
Mm-hmm.
And what do we think we should do? And sometimes the think we should do wins out because that often is the mind of the consumer, the gamer, the person. What we think we're supposed to do is often the boilerplate, whatever that is handed down to us from somewhere else. And I think we often have that come out in many of these things. Whenever you look at a book and you think this maybe wasn't as helpful to me as a book, I don't often blame the writer. I think sometimes it's whoever told them to do it a certain way.
Yep. So if I were to go back through your Dragonlance work, Cam, where do you think I would find a very good example of where you did just what you just said, which is you said, this is what I've been told they want me to do, but I think this is what I really need to do. Where would I find that? Or where's a good example of that, do you think, looking back?
Yeah, good question. I think a lot, and very fondly, about the War of the Lance source book. You can still get this on drive-through. It was the big book about the whole period that the classic modules were set in, and so we really wanted to make it really good. We included versions of the characters. We did all that sort of stuff as you expect. It gave us a chance to rewrite some of the classes and things that we didn't think worked that great in previous books, but for the setting. So we had a good version of the Knights in there. I like the Knights better than the ones in the Wizards published book. But the part that I really enjoyed writing was this whole, almost like how the war was conducted and the army units and things. I'm not a military person. I'm not really down on that much, but there was one of the modules that was originally done for the classic series was by Doug Niles, and he was exceptionally good at doing this sort of military battle stuff. And I think it wasn't Dragons of War, but it was, Dragons of Glory, maybe? It wasn't even a real module. It was like a war game. It had counters in it, and it had maps, and it was like, play out these things using a battle system or whatever the heck the thing, or war machine. But what it did have was tons and tons and tons of content about military units and the composition of the armies and what they were like and how they worked. And I'd never seen that anywhere else before in other stuff since. So I made it my mission to sort of go, well, if you want me to write about the dragon armies, like, what are they? How do they work? I'm going to go back to this stuff which I consider to be source material.
Right.
I'm going to reinterpret it. I'm going to make up names for all his leaders. I'm going to put them in the proper orders of battle. I'm going to say, here's who the Green Dragon Army was. Here's who led them here. Here's how many units there were. And I figured out, like, dang, how many dragons were actually involved in all this, so I could count them up, right?
Yeah.
And it was a lot. And I also did my research, and I think this is the key part of making source books too. Researching all of this stuff, all this, what I guess you could consider primary source material if you were a historian. This is the primary sources was the stuff that was first written about them. And trying to figure out what all these sort of characters and people were doing at the same time, and looking at the timelines and saying, well, if they were here, then this must have been going on here. This Dragon High Lord was thrown out, and so he's not there anymore, so this person's here instead. All that research, right? It really did pay off. I thought that I've made sure that I'm as authentic as possible. If someone was to go back and read a sort of a side note somewhere in some book and came to this book and read it and said, "Oh, this is true. Right? This is actually
right."
BS anyone. I didn't fudge numbers. I should maybe have done. Would have been done faster, but you know what I mean. So That was the moment I thought, I think this is what people want to see. They want to know what these things are, so they can kind of springboard off that into their own stories with the dragon armies and the bad guys.
Is there... So the one thing that's kind of sticking in my head talking with you, Cam, is, again, I'm coming back to the idea of you working on so many of these different IPs and making them your own. Is there a multiverse somewhere where you did all original IP work? Or do you think this is where you were supposed to be? Or did you just end up here and flourish here? Does that make sense?
Yeah. My wife likes to say that I have this connection to the world of story. Like there's this, opening this channel. And that out there in this dimension of story, there is this constant, infinite amount of just tales and ideas and things. And that it just fire hoses into my brain at all times. And I think that is probably accurate, right?
And how does that happen? What is that? Can you give me any idea what that fire hose looks like or sounds like? Or
well,
is it?
It is the way to describe it is I'm an undiagnosed but pretty sure adult ADHD person, and so I think that is a lot of what it is. I have this. I have a vacuum of all this stuff that I see around me, and I sort of put it in my head. But the feeling of being in flow state when you sort of go into it, you're writing, and this just comes to you. You almost feel like a channel. Like I know it's me doing it, but I also think that some part of me knows that it's not entirely me, and that's
Right.
the sort of sense where the reason why I think it works for things with original IP, well, not original, but with someone else's IP. Two things. One, I've already read all the stuff that they've done. I've deep dive in it. I've consumed it. I know it, right? The second thing is, though, it acts as a filter for the impossible, infinite stuff coming in.
Interesting.
So I can help use that as a template to frame out something that's new and original for that IP. If I didn't have that template, it would just be like just garbage.
So the having those guardrails or those constraints, you think it allows you to focus more? Did I capture that?
Absolutely. And this is true also later on when we're working for Atlas Games. We were bringing back a lot of their old IP. And here's me being the one who did the new, helping to make the new version of Unknown Armies with Greg Stolze's help, or Robin Laws with Feng Shui and so forth. And again, the guidelines are already there. Let's make new stuff. Let's do it differently. Let's make a version of this I went to them and I said, what would you do if you were told to write this game that younger you had done, but make it more up to date with how you think games should work? And that's what we did for all those games. It was like the same thing. So I said, hey, this is a good process. Trust this process.
So if I were to walk over to my bookcase right now, grab the new, my latest version of Feng Shui, or Greg's gorgeous Unknown Armies books, where would I see your biggest fingerprint? So let's imagine that your name is erased from those books, and I were to read through them. What is distinctly Cam in either of those work?
Trick question, I think, because as a developer, a lot of the stuff I didn't write a lot in them, but I did have some direction, right? Unknown Armies, in one place I think you would see my influence strongly was the character creation system, because for that I drew back on what we had done for Smallville with the pathways, where you sit down as a group and you sort of create this setting for the players and yourself and the GM by drawing it out on a big piece of butcher paper and drawing connections between things and relationship mapping it and so on. But going through sort of steps doing that. None of that's original, by the way. This is all just stuff that people have done before in different ways.
Sure.
In fact, the pathways was Bobby Olson. She worked on Smallville with me. Her sort of contribution was this sort of awesome looking pathways setup where you would start off and then go through them and move through them. And even she said, I took that from Warhammer 40K, the rogue troop, what do we call it? Rogue Trader.
Rogue Trader, yeah.
I'm like, it's all cool. We all get this. But the versions of that, the idea that you got together and you make a character and then stuff. So there's a lot of the pathways stuff from Smallville in Unknown Armies character creation, because I felt it was the best way of making a group who were cohesive and had some sense of being together in a way that was fun for the eventual campaign that you'd see.
So you've had an opportunity to work with a lot of different people in this industry and collaborated with a lot of different people. Do you have a bit of a Mount Rushmore from a design creative standpoint? Are there 4 or 5, 3 or 4 names that really you put on your Mount Rushmore of RPG design?
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because over time you realize that these people are extremely human.
Right.
And one person's icon when you're younger becomes later on, you're like, oh, actually, they're not nice of a person or whatever. So I'm always very careful about this.
Yeah.
I think that there is a statue somewhere in my pantheon that is Greg Stafford, who is one of the greatest minds in gaming. May his soul forever travel in whatever realms he's traveling in. I think that Greg was probably one of the most influential people for me because he designed Pendragon. The whole stuff that he did with RuneQuest is sort of formative, even though I never played it. It's weird how that happens. But Pendragon, my favorite RPG of all time. So yeah, he designed that, and it was his holy grail. No pun intended. Was putting that game out. So he's definitely up there. I love Robin and Greg and all those folks from that, I guess, generation of gamers, from people, John Nephew, who gave me and my wife jobs in Minneapolis and Minnesota. Like, these are all wonderful people that, again, they've got their foibles, and they will be the first to tell you. They certainly are not people who have like the strongest, clearest sense of themselves being amazing. And I think that's a cool thing. I think we should all basically own our own faults. But yeah, Greg's up there. I don't know anyone else at this point who I'd put up in the same position, because I think that's asking for trouble for yourself and for them.
It was a very dangerous question. You navigated it very well, Cam. Very, very well.
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's Gary Gygax, obviously. No.
I had a question, Cam. Give me just a second. So you are not the first person who's been on the show that has cited Pendragon as their favorite RPG. And I can't just let that sit out there. What is it? What is it that makes this? It may be the most popular name associated with, well, my favorite game of all time, or the greatest RPG ever created. I've heard the different versions of this. Is Pendragon. Why is that the case for you?
So many levels, it's like an onion, right? I think that the fact that it's generational play is so well done, that you play your knight from being newly knighted, and then you age them and have kids, and then you have your kids become next knights, and you keep playing. Time rolls on. You can end the campaign if you play the whole Great Pendragon campaign from the beginning to the end with your grandkids, and whatever. There are times when your character will die a horrible, brutal end, and that's great because you did it heroically, or maybe you didn't. The system is very easy. It's like basic role playing, but turned into a D20 system, and it's roll under, but roll highest. It's oppositional rolls, which I've always loved. Have those in there. The fact that there are pairs of attributes in there, which are your personality traits, is so amazing. It was clearly one of the biggest influences for me on things later on, like, with Smallville and whatever, where I like, there are values and there are the things that matter to you. Why do you have them? And they're given them numbers and give them stats. And then I just love the Arthurian stuff. I especially love it when people remix it in a way that is not normal, right? If you put, like, the King Arthur movie that came out that was it Guy Ritchie's one, I think it was? Yeah. And everyone goes, oh, or other ones with him. The First Night, terrible movie. Sorry, that's, anyone out there who's a First Night fan, bad. But whenever they do a King Arthur story and they manage to capture the whole point of the Arthurian story, which is that King Arthur is not the main character,
right?
They do a really great job, and I'm really happy with that. I think that sort of that whole combination of the mechanics being things that really tickle me, the execution of it in the way that is just really the fidelity of what Greg did in that game to the source material is essential, and that was what inspired me in many ways. That and Marvel Superheroes with, like, how do you make a good licensed game?
Right.
Authenticity, fidelity, and removing the parts of the system that don't matter from other games because they're not going to support the kind of play you're wanting to tell is why, I will still be. The fourth edition of the game introduced magicians and things and other kinds of things. You could play spellcasting characters, but you had to sleep off the spells after you did them. I don't use any of that stuff because, for me, you're a knight and that's what you are. This game is about knights. Yep. It's not about being a rogue or a cleric type thing. It's knights.
So, guys, we're going to take another break. And this break, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about something that I've got a lot of questions about. And even though we've touched on it a little bit, we're going to dive into Cortex. We'll be right back.
Hey, it's me. I'm interrupting this episode, and I hope you're enjoying it, and I bet you're anxious to hear the rest. But before we jump back, I need a favor. Do you know someone who might enjoy this episode? Can you shoot them a quick message or maybe even send them a link to it? Listeners sharing this podcast was the primary reason we almost doubled our audience last year. Also, would you like to see and hear these games in action? Go to the Third Floor Wars YouTube channel and Twitch stream. Our actual plays combine compelling role-playing, character-driven action, and system tutorials. We create great stories while lifting the hood and showcasing the game mechanics. Links to both are in the show notes. Okay, last thing, and I mean it. Have you rated this podcast on your pod platform yet? Maybe even written a short review? It is a simple way for you to be even more awesome than you already are. Okay, now I'm done. Let's jump back and listen to the rest of this episode.
So before we really dive into Cortex Prime, I think I need to give some people a little bit of an understanding. So I've grabbed a blurb off the site. I'm going to read it off and then we'll dive in. Imagine a world-building tabletop RPG system where you and your players choose the genre, build the game, and forge the story from modular mechanics. Cortex Prime helps you create one-of-a-kind experience tailored to how you and your friends like to play and bring to life an experience you will never forget. Cortex Prime offers the options to harness the power of your imagination and inspire new stories, from single-session one-shots to epic adventures spanning years. You are writing a very big check with that description. that is a lot of promises being made, Cam.
Yeah.
Before we go in, though, I want to go to the day before the acorn dropped off to the tree. What is the origin, or where did this idea that became Cortex start to itch in the back of your brain?
Well, I will say Cortex is not my creation. The very beginning of it comes before me, right? I inherited this thing through a series of events, but the stuff that I can really lay claim to having started out making an influence on it as a system and as a game and see where it was going to go was the Big Game Heroes Handbook for Serenity, right?
Okay.
That was a thing that was near the tail end of that whole product line. It was like, what can we do that will just break this game and do cool things that are different from how it was? Where do we expand on things? Where do we introduce new concepts, and what do we do with it? Cortex, I think the whole history of it has been written before. I even sort of summarized it somewhat in the Cortex Prime book, but it's basically it came from Sovereign Stone, which was a fantasy sort of D&D competitor at the time that Larry Elmore and Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, those folks all kind of wanted a fantasy game that wasn't D&D. And the system they used for it was very much like all the stats have dice types and instead of numbers, and you'd roll a bunch of them, and then you compare the difficulties, and you'd see how you do. So that was the origin of that. Jamie Chambers, who worked with Margaret at Sovereign Press, the people who published Sovereign Stone, they got the license to Dragonlance, but they also got, not long after that, the license to do Serenity, which was one of Margaret's favorite things is Firefly. She loves it. Couldn't get Firefly, but could get Serenity. The movie was coming out, so huge, big deal. But what system to use? So I think Jamie kind of cobbled together stuff from Savage Worlds, which at the time was in its very much infancy. First book had just come out. Unisystem, so Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and then the real spine of it came from Sovereign Stone because it was something that they owned, and they could just take the stuff from there. And it became its own thing. It wasn't Cortex really, but it was called that because the Cortex is the name of the internet in Firefly.
Right.
So they used that for the name of the system.
I've never made that connection. I've never made that connection. Yeah. Oh my God, that's really funny. Sorry.
Yeah. Wow.
I can't believe I've never connected it. Wow.
It's not actually the first time it's been said, but yeah, that is definitely the origin.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Battlestar Galactica came after that. Same system exactly. Same thing. Changes a few things. There was a Cortex system book that came out that was, people had said that they were using Cortex from Serenity and from Battlestar Galactica as kind of their own rules for something else, which was cool. We sort of thought that was a cool idea. So we put out the Cortex system book. It was like a blue book with a weird thing on the front cover, soft cover. It was okay, and I had fun doing it because I got to write some settings for that. But the real change things happened when Jamie had left the company, and I had inherited a lot of the stuff, and I become the sort of the lead designer, line developer for Cortex, and for the stuff that we were making. We were like, we need more IP. We need something else. I had just done Big Damn Heroes Handbook. Had some really cool work on, and we did Supernatural was the other one. Supernatural came out with.
Right.
So I was finishing that line off too. So I had these two sort of product lines that they were ending. That was that. No more coming after that. We needed a new one. Christy Cardenas, who is Margaret's agent and who was the licensing person we had at Margaret Weiss Productions, went out and got Smallville from the WB and Leverage from Electric Entertainment. And those two games licenses at the same time. And I said, hey, why don't we make both at once? And they said, that's crazy. And it was crazy, but we wanted to get games made.
Yeah.
So I had said, I'm going to take Cortex and I'm going to break it down into bits and I'm going to rebuild it up for these two products. They will be very different. And is that okay? And I said, we don't care. You're the damn designer. You do that. I went out and I did some very basic stuff. I think I was calling it Cortex something, whatever, alpha or whatever. But I had said, let's just take the idea of stats with dice and plot points and rolling opposition and everything about that. I got a bunch of my friends from Evil Hat. So Rob Donahue and Fred Hicks and I think Clark Valentine came onto that project too. And that was Leverage. And then I also got some folks, Miriam Roburn. She came onto that. Bobby Olson, Clark's wife Amanda, was my chief editor for Smallville. And Joe Blomquist and Mary Blomquist, we all got together and did that for Smallville. Tiara was our graphic designer. But the two teams were working independent of one another, and I was the linking thing. So we would work on initial concept stuff, and we did that for Cortex over at Smallville, and then we did the stuff over at stuff at Leverage. And Miriam did some amazing things. I hired her because of her indie work, and a lot of what she'd done at the time was things like Full Light, Full Steam or something, and there's a couple of other really cool things. The thing with that sort of project was I wanted her to go as far out into the wilderness of story games as possible, and I would rein this and bring it back in and try and make it a little bit more trendy, right?
Yeah.
And with Leverage, they were like, so cool, just do this. Let's go everywhere completely, totally freeform. I'm like, no, let's not do that as freeform as that. Let's make it a little bit more structured. Those two things both came out, and they were well received by the people who actually read them, and that was cool. I think the thing immediately that happened with Smallville was no one used it for Smallville.
Right.
It was the CW TV show primetime drama type game. At the same time as Primetime Adventures was coming out, very, very different game, same kind of idea of TV show stories. This had a whole lot more of that kind of crunch going on with it, which is like some people like that. So cool. Leverage. Fast, slick. I could run that game from no characters at all to a finished story in 3 hours at a convention. Love it. And also love the property. John Rogers, great guy. He backed it 100%. And that was one of those things where the people came back to us and said, we've read through the rules and we have some comments. I'm like, you're the licensor. What do you mean you read the rules? Because the people, the CW were like, these images are good. Thank you.
Right.
Stamp. Right.
Yep.
But those two things, the whole thing kind of came together in a way that made it clear that this was a new version of Cortex. This was Cortex Plus. This was a new thing. We had gone up and made it. We were going to sort of move us forward. We had these cool indie, fresh ideas coming into it that we wanted to incorporate, but we had this sort of basic, stable background of the same mechanic in some ways being used. Loved it. People were using our stuff and making hacks of it. So we made the Cortex Plus Hackers Guide. We did a Kickstarter for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's where Dave and Phil came on board, and we did that stuff there with them. But really, the whole thing was each time we got an IP, we wanted to take it and break it down the game system into little bits, like shaking out your box of Lego and building up something else that made it more sense. So I think the pinnacle of that was basically Marvel Heroic. When that license was scored, which was a huge momentous thing for me. I think that's one of my core memories of being in that office in New York. And the guy, I love the story because it's, I can't forget. I was in there with a whole bunch of bigwigs from Marvel. One of them was some VP of publishing, and he name dropped a character. He said something like, Shooting Star. Well, can you play someone like Shooting Star? I said, you mean Texas Twister's girlfriend? And he's like, this guy. And, my agent was next to me going, what the hell are they talking about? And I'm like, oh, yeah, we're in.
Well, as a lifelong comic book fan and the TSR Marvel, like that must have been, you must have floated out of that office.
We were down the street outside of it, and I was shaking, and I was telling Christy, I said, I think we've got it. It's like, we got some things to figure out. And I think we do. What are we going to do? We have to make this game now.
So something, Cam, that's interesting to me, when you go through that process of deconstructing this mechanical core, handing it off to two different camps that start doing their own things with it, bringing it back, break it down again and break it. Is there some things that you have discovered in that process that you didn't recognize maybe early on working with Cortex? What have you figured out about Cortex that makes it so special?
I think that it's the modular element of it, and how you put these things together, they kind of turn the dials in different ways, was what really could have hit it for me, was that you can even rewrite the entire system of what stats you use. Every generic RPG I'd ever played or tried out and run before that, it was the same core character sheet, but they changed some of the labels a bit, Like this game, you can do this, but instead of having this race, they have this race, or this class is different, GURPS even has the same 4 stats always. It's all and there's obviously there's a ton of modular stuff that you build onto the chassis of GURPS, but this was something where I felt you can go back one step before even that. So with Cortex Prime, later on, when I was sort of figuring that out, I thought that this is going to have to be a toolkit game. It is not a game all by itself. You have to do games with it. Whereas I think what happened before was a generic game was like, this is a generic game system. You can build campaigns with it. Right? This is one step previous to that. That may be why I think some people have a hard time with it, because they can't figure out, like, they'd like to have someone do that work for them, which makes total sense. That's the whole reason that people do that. But for the folks who've really sort of taken this and run with it, I mean, I think it really does spark them to do something really cool.
So you just answered the question I hadn't asked yet. Which I love. So Cam, the one thing I can say as someone outside of Cortex, right, that has only consumed and looked at it, and talked to people about it, here's a phrase that I've never heard. Yeah, Cortex is fine. It's good. I've never heard that phrase. It has always been incredibly passionate, right? I like Cortex put it into my veins. Yeah. I love it. Or I couldn't connect with it. Do you think that that's what it is the fact that it's a one step back from a generic system?
I think that may be part of it, right? I also think that's one of those games, and this happened even when we were doing Marvel Heroic. We would go to game stores. There were so many people when it was launched would run it at their local stores or for game clubs all across the East Coast. There's a kind of a New York-based group that just did it without me even asking them, because they didn't know who they were, where you demonstrate the game and you have people play it and they get it.
Right.
But when they read it, they don't know if they understand it. Why
is that?
I think it's because I'm a terrible writer, Craig.
Because I'm not good at what I do, Craig.
No, I think it's because, and someone's asked me once, how do you know if your game is good, well written? I said, well, is the editor any good? Because it certainly isn't because you're any good, right? Sometimes I think that the editor's the person. So whenever someone says, I really like what you wrote, I say, thank Amanda for that. She's my editor. Yeah. I didn't like what you wrote. Well, Amanda tried, but she couldn't make it better.
She couldn't save it.
I think that the funny thing about that mid area is, like, you kind of want that for something. Like, you don't want anyone to go meh. You kind of want them to either hate it or love it. Right. And it's very hard on your psyche when you deal with the people who can't stand it, because they'll go on at length about how it's not good. and the very next day you'll have someone say, "This is the best game we've had a lot of fun with it."
Well, I can say the same thing about Marvel Heroic, right? I know that there was a lot of people that bounced off of that when it came out, and it had a target painted on it by a lot of other people. Yet, and I think part of this is time too. In my other interviews, Cam, it is referred to all the time. When I talk to other creators and they talk about games that influenced them and that had an impact on them, Marvel Heroic comes up over and over again. And and I don't know. I'm still digging a little bit here, Cam. Why? Let's use Marvel's example. So why do you think, and you saw it firsthand, what were people bouncing off of? Where did that agita come from? And why were there many that loved it and now cite it as part of their development?
I think there's something about when you adopt something and you haven't really fully tried it out until things click in your head. And I think that one of the things that make that harder is when it's not that much like a game you've played before.
Right.
And a lot of the anecdotal evidence that I had, and I have to say this is all anecdotal because I didn't conduct widespread surveys or anything, but when we would have this in game stores, often it was a dad and his two kids would come in and play. And the dad would go, "Oh, I'm not sure how this works. This doesn't make sense. Where's the hit points? I'm not sure what level I am. Anything. What everything is this?" The kids who'd never played an RPG before, but loved Marvel stuff, got it like this, instantly. Right? And part of it might be that we have baggage from our previous experience that gets in the way of learning new things and adopting new stuff. And that is true across the board for a lot of things, right? For Marvel, I think that when people could figure out, oh, I know what's going on here now, or this feels like that thing that, now I know what this is. Their neurons are connecting or whatever it is, right?
Right.
For people who've never played games before, it's like, this is how this works. Cool, let's try it. I'm going to be Captain America. This is neat. What dice do I roll? Okay, whatever. The other side of this, I think, that makes it where people were kind of figuring out once they played it, is that the ritual of putting together your dice into your dice pool from different parts of your character sheet goes so far into telling that narrative for you and giving you the juice for that it doesn't matter that sometimes you're using the same die size as another thing on your sheet, right? Because one of the complaints I've had before is that there's this one trait called distinctions where there's 3 of them. And you could have, I don't know, I could pull a book out here and read out 3, but, Deadly and World's Greatest Dad and has a spare tire. Those 3 could be your distinctions. And much like Fate's aspects, where you would invoke them because they're part of your sort of like narrative like description, unlike that, they all have a D8 next to them. Right? Yep. So they're the same die. You get to pick one of them and put it in your dice pool. So people have said, well, what does it matter which one I pick? They're the same thing. It doesn't matter. And they're sort of thinking mechanically. I'm like, well, no, it does matter. Which one of those things is helping you succeed here? And we're not talking about the dice. We're talking about the thing,
Yep.
Deadly. Okay, I'm trying to get this guy with my big-ass sword. I'm deadly now, Saving this kid, I'm the world's greatest dad. That's why I'm using it. Does it make a difference mechanically? No. Does it have to? I don't think so, right? So that's kind of where I think people, when they try it out, they sort of start getting it. But maybe on a first read, or someone like me trying to explain to them without having run it for them, they often go, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm understanding it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've been running playtests of this is going to bring us full circle. I've been running playtests of Sentinels to get ready to run it on the channel. So what I often will do is when I premiere a game that's new to me on the channel, I run it offline for my patron community. We just get together and I run it. And there's a similar concept there, right? Where we have 3 things, 3 die that we build to build our pool. Powers, is it attributes? It is, I think, right? It's like the skill list.
It's not there anymore.
Anyway, but it's kind of, it's similar to what you said about Deadly, World Greatest Dad, right? Not the superhero part. And then the third is the status die, which is, I could do 3 podcasts on how freaking clever the concept of the status die is.
I love it. It's a huge, it's a cool feature.
Oh, it's such a cool feature. But what's really neat was watching people who had never played the game, because I had taught it to them 10 minutes before we started making our first rolls, watching them build the narrative of those dice and putting it together and informing it. So I completely understand it, especially in the context of the same idea there, which is and it could be two D10s and a D6, but those two D10s came from two different locations, and it has a huge impact on the game. Insanely clever, my friend. Insanely clever.
And also the fact that the dice they're not attached to the thing once they're in the pool.
Right. Yeah, it's the results from them. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't track where the die came from. You just track what, and that means that you know that you can narrate them however you want as being what really mattered there, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, guys, we are going to take one more break. When we get back from this break, we're going to get to one of my favorite segments. I have now spent just about an hour and a half talking to Cam about where he came from, all of the things that he's been a part of in making. We're going to put all of that aside, and I want to find out what he likes to chew on. We're going to find out what he's been grooving on lately. We'll be right back.
Are you enjoying our long-form interviews with creatives on this podcast? Maybe you're craving deeper discussions about our guests or some of the RPG plays on our Twitch and YouTube channel. Well, I've got an opportunity for you. You see, Third Floor Wars now has a Patreon-only Discord server. You can join a vibrant community of like-minded enthusiasts diving deep into every episode of our RPG plays and podcast. Connect with fans, engage in spirited discussions, and unlock the behind-the-scenes insights. For just $1 a month, access a world of tabletop gaming goodness. Connect with passionate gamers who share your love for the Tabletop Podcast and everything produced on the third floor. As a Patreon supporter, you also enjoy ad-free episodes of this podcast. You can immerse yourselves in captivating stories and fascinating interviews without interruptions, taking your listening experience to a whole new level. By joining the Third Floor Wars Patreon community, you not only gain exclusive access to the Patreon-only Discord server, but you also support the growth of my podcast and channels. Your contributions enable me to continue creating high-quality content that entertains, educates, and upskills tabletop enthusiasts like yourself. Maybe don't wait. Join the Third Floor Wars Patreon today and unlock a world of camaraderie, discussions, and knowledge. Visit patreon.com/Third Floor Wars or check the link in the show notes and come join our community. The Third Floor Wars Patreon-only Discord server awaits you. I and the other patrons can't wait to welcome you with open arms and a fistful of dice.
This was a throwaway thing that would come up every once in a while in interviews where we would get talking about a TV show that someone had just been watching or a movie that they really enjoyed. And I have found it to be a very informative end cap to what I try to do in my interviews. So for you, Cam, is there a game, a video game, prestige TV, a movie or something that recently got inside of your head and has been living there for a little while and won't leave?
Yeah, there's a few things, but there's a setting, and it's got a couple of games that it's using to help you tell stories in it. That's Free League's Simba Room, which is a dark fantasy setting, very Nordic, very kind of dark and moody and gloomy. There's a game called Simba Room that is the original version of it. There's also Ruins of Simba Room, which is a 5e version. I'm running an OG version of that for my local game group, and I'm also running the 5e version for some friends online. The whole setting is really, really cool, and I think it is part of a larger appreciation that I have for the Nordic noir vibe, which all the way through the pandemic, I was watching tons of this on Netflix, like, Wallander and The Killing, and just like what is going on up there in Norway It is
We need to check in on them, I think.
Sweden. I love Free League. I'm have worked with them. I was the editor for the Alien role playing game, so I worked with Thomas on that thing, and we visited Sweden a couple times. We have many good friends up there. It's such a nice place. They're such nice people. They're very friendly. It's great. It's sunny a lot. We were there over Midsummer, which the movie really painted a bad picture of Midsummer as well. But I think the thing that's funny is that like when it's dark and cold up there, which we've never been at that point, wow, you get these weird stories coming out of that. And I think that the funny thing about Symbaroum, which is obviously it's a fantasy thing, but it's got a lot of that idea of like, this is a really big forest. It is ancient. It is very dangerous. It seems okay if you just step into it and you can still see the civilized lands through the trees. But if you go any further, oh, well, there's giant spiders. It's like Mirkwood dialed up to 100, right?
Great analogy, yeah.
And the other thing about Symbaroum, which I really love, is that it's funny because it draws people in with that kind of like vibe. But what this game setting is really telling you is like, colonialism is bad, guys.
Tell me about that. Is that because of them being of the players being the invasive force into the forest? What do you mean by that? That's interesting.
Yeah, to some degree. Like, so like, it really does sort of tell a story. I mean, the backstory is like 20 years ago. There was a huge, long time ago. There was a long, big war against these dark lords in the south. And these humans who lived down there, the sort of people down there, they lost. They won in the end because their queen was rescued and they got her back and she had to wear a mask now. But they defeated the bad guys, but their whole lands were poisoned and toxic and messed up. It was like necromancers and other horrible things. So they said, well, we're all going to die. Don't worry, we'll go over the mountains. We believe there's a new land there that we have from stories. There's land there. We can go there and resettle it. In the ancient stories, there was like land. So they all cross over. They find some land. People were living on it. They take over the land and they, beat the people who didn't want to work with them, and then everyone else went running onto the forest.
Mm-hmm.
And so the sort of the plains and the sort of grasslands and things, that was fine. They built the cities and did everything else. But there's this big forest past that. And like, well, the stories tell us that we came from here. This is like the origin of humanity. So this is our thing. We're supposed to come back and reclaim it. This is our job. And the people who lived like, I don't think that's really true. And also, you've been gone a long time. Plus, you're only here because you got beaten over there. And this, also you're not being very nice. So there's a lot of this whole sort of the tropes of like, sort of the conquistadors settling in indigenous parts of South America. There's this idea of reclaiming land that was maybe you think was yours once before, but really isn't now. Yeah. Which I don't think we need to go into much too about that. But I think the whole point of this is it is a very, very hard-hitting underscore of this. There are not a lot of people who are good guys, even the ones who think they are.
Yep.
And as you play through the campaign that they've released for it, you start realizing there's even worse things happening. There's whole things. Some of the people who you think are bad guys really are doing the best they can. Mm-hmm. Some of the people who you think are like idols and the best folks in the story, they're part of a schism that is not really working. And everything is going bad that way too. So it's really, really fun. Has that Nordic feel, has that dark fantasy thing, but also telling really incredible stories without people realizing until they get to that point. They go, hang on a minute. This seems bad. So... yeah.
So, Kim, you have a very interesting test case happening right now, and I want to ask about it. So you've got two groups that you're running this game for. Same setting, two different systems, two different tables, same GM. What's happening that's different on those two tables? And can any of it be attributed to the system, or is it strictly just who's playing?
Also, two different age groups, right? The ones who are playing the 5e one are younger. The oldest, I think, is maybe she's turning 30. And the others, like, there's one player who's the same age as my oldest son, is 22. And that's the thing. But they're all they're like, hey, we want to play some 5e. And I'm like, oh, I'll give you some 5e. It's Ruins of Symbaroum. And then the Monday night group is this group that has one of the players is my friend Kimball, who I've mentioned before early in the interview, where He is one of the guys who was there at the very beginning, one of my OG guys. And he and I are both forever GMs, and it's really hard to run games for each other now because, like, we are the GM. And if you're a player, you're like, oh, I'm going to cause some trouble because I'm a player now. I don't want to be a player. And this is a great thing because he is playing a character who finally, I think, is okay. He's okay playing without being a hard thing for him. The combat in the OG system is very fast. He doesn't like 5e anymore. He thinks it's too slow and boring. And apart from the fact that things cost a lot in XP, and they're all worried they're not leveling up fast enough, which doesn't matter in OG Simple but whatever. Yep. They're having a great time, and it's really good. So I think the difference between the two is partly is the group, right? I think in each case they have different demands on what they want for the game.
Mm-hmm.
I think that both games work really well, and I think that they do address specific styles differently while also at the same time capturing the setting both really, really well. So I'm quite impressed with how they do it.
What is the expectation difference on these two tables that you're seeing that you can attribute to generational, right? So you've got a younger group and you've got a bunch of old dudes like me playing on the other thing. What do you see different between the two of them? Some have played the OG group. Sounds like you've got a guy who's you've been playing with for decades now and who's played several games. And maybe this younger group, 5e is the only game that they've ever played, or they're relatively new. What are you seeing different from a generational standpoint between these two groups, or is there one?
I think there is, but I think, generational stuff is funny because we always think we're the underdog or the downtrodden or fighting against a man we're of a certain age. And I see a lot of what's happening now with any generation of the young folks, sort of the same thing that we went through when we were younger. There's that funny thing about us as Gen X where we're like, whatever, we don't care. We're the forgotten generation. No one ever remembers. That's always boomers and millennials. I'm like, okay, just calm down.
Calm down, exactly.
I think the young folks who are really enjoying, like this group loves Critical Role. They really, really love the story as the foremost part of it. Right. But they also love the idea that they can kind of poke around and make a cool character from bits and pieces of stuff. And there's a lot of that in 5e. And I think that's one of the appeals of that. I don't think that 5e is the best storytelling medium. And I think that a lot of people will talk about that in other places with more emphasis on various things than I will. But I still think you get great stories out of it. And I think that's been proven, for me at least, by the games I've run, right? But the OG Simple game has a different side, which I really like. The GM doesn't roll dice at all. It's all player facing. It really does sort of like put the corruption sort of, if you do magic, things go really bad, really high up on the sort of rules side of it. So it tries to enforce that specific mood a lot. The 5e version does too, to some degree. Like you cast spells until you burn through your corruption, and then you turn into an abomination and things go bad. But I think it's even more so in the OG one. And also the fact that I don't do anything but just tell you how bad things are.
Is there a game out there that's gotten onto your radar that you haven't had a chance to play, but you're dying to explore?
Yes. In fact, it's funny because just this week I was drawn to, and I've seen it before, but I haven't done anything with it. And that's I think it's called the Polymorph system, and it's the one that they use for Mazes RPG.
I know nothing about this. I know Mazes, but I have not explored it at all. So talk to me.
I think it's like 9th Tier or someone studios. I forget the name of the company. I feel bad. Maybe you can put a link in somewhere. But they also did Return to the Dark Tower RPG. And the reason that this was all brought to my attention is because my buddy Dave Chalker, who I worked with on Marvel stuff before and all Cortex things, he is one of the creators of the Thunder Road board game, Thunder Road Vendetta.
It's literally right here on my shelf. Yeah.
And they're making an RPG based on it.
I saw
my other friend, Clark Valentine, who is he's a brother to me, he is doing the vehicle rules for this RPG. And the system is called Polymorph, and I'm like, I don't know what that is. What is that? Sounds fun. Why do you guys love it so much? So I went and looked up Mazes and promptly ordered it and returned the Dark Tower straight away once I read it. It is OSR. I don't like OSR games that much, but it's kind of in a way that's like we're doing OSR, but we're not really. The game has you pick one of different dice types based on your class or your thing. This is how mazes work, at least. So if I'm playing the Sentinel, I have a D10. If I'm playing a fighter, I have a D6. And then everything you do in the game, you roll your one die for. But the list of things you can do is on the side of it, and they have different numbers for success. So one success might be 4, 5, 6, 7 equals a success for this thing you want to try and do. So if your class has a 1d4, you will have a 1 in 4 chance of getting that 4. Whereas if your class has like a d8, the 4, 5, 6, 7 is much more common, right?
Right.
There's a lot of weird math going on here, but anyway, the way this works out, it's quite fast and loose, and there's only one die. You always roll one die. And I just think that's really cool. And it's got the different dice types thing, which I love, obviously. It's got a fast sort of execution. And two people who I care a lot about are making a game based on it, which I think is really good too. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. When these things come from Amazon or whoever I ordered from, I will be overjoyed to read it, and then I will find out and follow them whenever they do their eventual Kickstarter, no doubt.
I guess the last thing I want to ask you, Cam, after having this conversation with you, I've caught you getting very excited about the setting, about the narrative. I've also caught you getting excited about mechanics as well.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself drawn more to one or the other, or are you in a really nice sweet spot in between?
I was pigeonholed as and they've made this term up, not for me, but for games that I like to design, which is trendy, right?
I heard you use that term, and I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, so it's obviously a neologism. It's traditional games versus indie games.
Okay.
So it's trendy is in between them. It's like games that have a lot of sort of like story game type sort of elements, but have a traditional mechanic or baseline or something. So they're not full on into the land of like, Mountain Witch or whatever, but they're not also not D&D or whatever else. So the trendy realm is where I live. And I think Free League, their games live in that zone. Yep. Modiphius's games kind of live in that somewhat similar zone, especially the ones where because the guys at Modiphius have said before that they like Cortex a lot and the games were done, so there's a lot of that influence. We all feed on each other. It's like a huge, big mess. But I think that space is one where it's okay to try something that's very narrative focused, that's very different from it isn't simulationist in terms of like the idea of we're trying to simulate real life.
Right.
It's not a physics engine, is how I've described it before.
Yep.
It's a story engine, and the way that it does that in a certain way is that it uses its rules and its mechanics to sort of help you tell cool stories while not feeling so distant from the thing that you suddenly... This isn't a game anymore. This is just me playing cards, saying weird stuff,
Well, Cam, there's a lot of really cool things to do on a Monday morning, like getting ready to run Symbaroum tonight. But you wasted an hour and a half with me, and I want you to know how much I appreciate that.
Well, I am just overjoyed with the fact that you invited me on the show. Thank you for doing that. Appreciate it.
For those of you listening, guess what? This is the end. You made it. And I appreciate you doing that. Take care. Oh, you've been very patient with me, Cam. This was great. Here we're just going to talk about stuff you dig. It can be something that you have, that you loved a while ago, something new that's come across. But I'll set it up for you and we'll talk through it. Cool?
Yep.
All right. I love how we have talked about all of this a little bit already, so it makes me dive into them a little bit different each time.
I'm not trying to ruin your outline here. I'm just,
Cam, that's why I said the thing at the beginning. This is what I love. This is what I love. And what's really interesting to me, Cam, having done this for a little while now, is in the same way you have like an emergent story that comes out of play, I find it happening in my interviews too, where like themes just tend to emerge out and come, and it fascinates me how our brains work and how we force things into narratives and into themes. It's so cool.
Yeah.
All right, I'll bring us back. Holy shit, Cam. That was amazing. That was fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome. I hope I don't talk too much. Am I coherent? That's the best part.
Dude, this was an incredible segment. Like, and I'm not gonna lie, like I had some pretty high expectations. Like I said, I've been very much looking forward to talking to you.
It's all downhill from here.
I mean, and there was times where I was just like, I need to end this interview. It's just not kidding.
Yeah.
No, this is perfect. All right, I'll bring us back. Hey, are you still here? Look, the podcast is over. And you sat through all of the breaks and bloopers? Well, I mean, if you're here, you might as well run over to patreon.com and become a supporter. Don't forget to rate and review this podcast too while you're at it, on whatever platform you're listening to. I do appreciate you sticking around. Take care.